Hello and welcome to the Consistency Project with E.C. Sinkowski. My name is Patrick Cummings. In every episode, I have the privilege of having a discussion with E.C. on subject matters that range from nutrition to fitness to the choices we can all make to live a healthier, more functional life. By exploring both the principles at play and the actions worth carrying out as a result, it's our goal to get you thinking, get you moving, and get you taking more consistent steps toward optimizing your well-being. Thank you so much for tuning in. And how are you today, E.C.?
I'm good. What's up with you?
Fantastic. I'm doing great. We are going to talk about I'm doing a podcast. This is my favorite thing in the world. We're going to talk about getting slightly better every day for the rest of our lives today. Before we do though, I just want to remind folks, if you are listening and you are not yet subscribed or following the show in whatever app you are listening to this, be sure you do so you don't miss a future episode from us. All right. What the heck are we talking about today? 1% better every day.
Yeah, I don't know if, it's accurate to fully attribute this idea to James Clear or not. I've certainly seen the graph that he created about continuous improvement reshared a lot. And it's this idea of getting, as you said, 1% better every day, where this graph shows you that when you get 1% better every day at the end of a year, for example, you're 37 times better at that skill than where you started. And so it's just like exponential improvement on a skill or a task in life. And, I want to be really clear at the outset. I like a lot of James Clear's stuff a lot. And I don't even know totally his opinions on this topic. He could very well agree with me. So I'm just kind of taking this concept and taking it on a tangent and looking at how we would apply it in terms of nutrition or fitness or health. And again, I really like a lot of his ideas. And where I saw this graph on his blog talking about continuous improvement, one of the things I really liked about it was the general overall message. And that was that we often really set these kind of lofty, big goals, which is fine. But then to get to them, we go through these really extreme changes that just don't stick. Like we try to get there too quickly. And, people want to lose a lot of weight, for example, maybe. So they go on these unsustainable crash diets, which we talk about all the time. So his main point, I think, is instead, okay, let's just make small little changes. And those small little changes over time will compound and add up to really big changes and successes. And that I love, 100% agree. We need more of that messaging, all of that stuff, less hacks and gimmicks, right? Okay, what I want to tease out, however, is the different ways that this idea of 1% better every day can and does go wrong for people, in my opinion. And I kind of have three takes on this. The first, the audience can probably guess this one based on some of our prior podcasts, but whenever we talk about percentages, we have to check ourselves, like percent of what? What does that really mean in terms of outcomes that we care about? And so this case is 1% better of X topic, a useful way to measure and improve on that goal. Second, in application, I think this 1% better mantra of making these small changes often leads to this or is interpreted as, any small change is better. Any small change I make is a better thing. When really we have to ask ourselves, is this small change in the direction of something we want? And then third, continuous improvement. We don't need continuous improvement. We need improvement to a certain level and then maintenance of that level. Okay,
so we're going to dive into each one of those. Before we do, I don't think you mentioned it. The James Clear's book that this comes from is called Atomic Habits. The reason I mentioned that, and the reason I think it's just worth putting a pin in, because you made it clear you're not attacking him or this idea, but I do think this is important because this is a nugget that has been pulled out of that book and has basically become a meme in and of itself.
Right.
So almost regardless of what James writes about in the book or what he means with the continuous improvement,
totally,
people will take that and extrapolate any number of things, which is kind of why I'm excited to have you pick this apart.
Like 1% better, 1% better. It's like, okay, What are we talking about now?
Exactly. And so it almost means nothing.
Right.
And so I like this idea of actually looking at it for what that is and what it means and what it doesn't mean.
Right.
Okay. So first one first. You mentioned the percents. We have to ask ourselves, percent of what, and whether that's even a useful scale to create or measure, let's just say nutrition or health goals. So let's just unpack that one first.
Yeah, I think 1% better every day is a little bit too micromanaging of an approach to really apply to these nutrition and lifestyle habits. It's just an unrealistic way to split up and track on those type of goals. Let's look at, getting more sleep, right? Somebody wants to maybe increase to 7 hours of sleep. Maybe they're currently averaging closer to 6 hours of sleep a night. So currently they're sleeping 360 minutes, right? I mean, so what are they going to do? Set their alarm for 1% longer tomorrow to 363 minutes, right? And the next night it's like 366 minutes, and so on they go. I mean, just the math and the time to try to figure out where they are on these 1% gains is better spent just sleeping. So what's more realistic in a case of somebody who's like, okay, I want to improve my sleep time, is to pick sort of a cutoff that is meaningful and that they can be consistent with. Maybe they'll say, okay, I'm going to try to set my bedtime 20 minutes earlier. That's a great place to start. And then spend weeks maybe trying to do that, setting the habit, and that they're actually really doing it before then saying, okay, now let me try to set it back another 20 minutes, and so on they go. Another example could be like the 800-gram challenge. Somebody tries it out. Maybe they see that they're averaging 500 grams of fruits and vegetables. Okay, so if we try to do this 1% better every day, what are they going to do? Target 505 grams tomorrow?
Extra grape. One extra grape.
Yeah, I know. Like 510 the next. I mean, no one sets these goals of, like you just kind of joked around, like I'm going to eat one more grape tomorrow. So it's like, okay, well, what's a meaningful increment that they would split that down into? I think 100 grams is probably kind of the next meaningful step. Why? That's about a cup. That's about a serving size. So when we think about how we would apply like eating habits, it's like, okay, we're going to look at like eating a usual kind of ish serving, so that this person would probably then target, okay, I'm going to try to get to 600 grams, and then try that for a while, wait till they're there, and then so on and so they go. So the only thing where I can think of where 1% better is actually a useful, true value to shoot for is at the very top end of fitness. Like if you have a 500-pound maximum back squat, right, or a 5-minute mile, shooting for a 505-pound back squat or a 457 mile or something like that are very realistic next potential steps relative to their current level. The problem there is they're not going to be able to replicate 1% improvements every day. Like they're not going to go 505, 510, and so on. It's going to take many, many days to get to that next 1%, even though that maybe is the margin that they're next looking for. And so my point here is, yes, breaking our goal into small chunks is really useful. It's just that 1% increment is often not, and that the progression is going to look much more like a stair step, not this smooth, continuous line up where the height of the stair isn't 1%. And instead, we have to think about, hey, what is a realistic amount for that individual, as well as what makes sense in terms of how life works. Again, we're not going to set our alarm for 3 minutes later. So really this precision of 1% isn't going to be there in application for so many of us. And, I guess you could potentially argue that that's semantics. I would say it's not, because, right, are we talking about setting realistic goals and realistic expectations? And we want to look at this at how it's actually going to play out. And so again, I really like the sentiment of, hey, we got to make small changes for big improvements, but 1% gains every day is not what it looks like.
You mentioned kind of the step changes, maybe that you would recommend, the 100 extra grams, the 20 minutes before. Is that how you'd suggest somebody break up a goal, whether it's, again, nutrition, fitness, whatever? It's like, is there some kind of formula, like not 1%, but maybe 5% or 10%, figure out what that looks like, work backwards from there?
Yeah.
That does make sense, or that you maybe would recommend?
Yeah, I think 5 to 10% is an interesting idea that we'll get to, but I think it's pretty hard to give kind of a good formula, because it's really going to come down to A, how far you are from the goal that you want, and then B, what's your level of proficiency already in that task. So let's say that we have somebody who wants to increase their deadlift. Like, how far away are they from how much they want to lift? Are they 100 pounds away or 5 pounds away? But then just important as that concept is, what's your proficiency? Have you been deadlifting regularly for years, or did you just start last month? Because it's easy to assume it would be quicker to achieve a 5-pound jump versus 100 pounds. But in reality, it's going to be much faster for a beginner to jump 100 pounds than it is for the advanced lifter to jump 5 pounds, right, in terms of time. And so we actually find that beginners can make some small, simple changes that tend to have a bigger payout, perhaps more than kind of a 1% gain. But then it's the return on the investment you could think about as your proficiency increase slows. So as you develop more and more proficiency, the work required to make that same jumps as you were in the beginning is much, much higher. And so the improvement curve is not this sort of exponential up forever, but instead it curves up, but then sort of levels off, almost approaching horizontal as you, really approach your genetic potential. And so this is why it's so important to understand the context of the person and their goals, really to set a realistic timeline. And so I can't really think of much in health, nutrition, fitness that I would really break into kind of 1% pieces. It's just too small of a change to focus on. I mean, even something like weight, for example, when we look at 1% changes, we're well within what we expect from day-to-day water weight fluctuations. So maybe, up 2 pounds, down 2 pounds, something like that. But at the same time, you're never going to be changing 2 pounds every single day in the same direction, right? So again, it's just irrelevant. I like this 5 to 10% idea. You suggested maybe a 5% change. I think it'd be interesting to think about how long does it take me to achieve 5% of what I want or 10% of what I want? And I think that experience will then set the timeline better to figure out, okay, how long is it going to take me to get to 100%?
Got it. All right. So the second issue you mentioned was the implicit assumption that any small change is an improvement, right? Can you explain that? The thing I always think about is like, I think it's easy to be in motion, but it's not always easy to move forward. Totally. And so it strikes me that that's kind of what we're talking about here. Yeah.
I forget which podcast that was a while back, but I was totally thinking about that. Like, are we just moving around like flailing, or are we moving in the right direction? Right. It's really important to understand, is this a change that's just different, or is this a change that's a productive different? Because the two are very different. Something like the sleeping more goal, if we go back to that one, I think it's pretty easy to kind of assess if you are in fact heading in the right direction, right? Like I was asleep for a longer period of time. But I would say even with that, which seems so obvious, is your goal really isn't just to have more hours on some sort of data log somewhere that shows that you were asleep. You're doing the sleeping more, I think, because you want better recovery or more energy in workouts, or maybe more productive on the job, or I don't know, better attention or something like that. Yep. And so you always still want to check in with the overall greater life outcome that you want. That, yeah, you want, great, I've got more minutes on paper, I'm asleep, but do I actually change in my performance? Because sleeping more is really just a simple measurement or a proxy of that overall goal that we want. And I think that's often what's missing, is that we make a change in something that's kind of generally related to what we want, but then we aren't really kind of tying it back into eventually and being like, okay, is the thing I want really changing? And so let's go with a nutrition example. Let's say that you want to learn more about nutrition and understand if your food choices are really the best ones. I hear that a lot, like optimizing my food choices, right? And so to do that, you decide to read more for the education. Now, hopefully we all know I love education. So generally education is good. But unfortunately, just reading more books doesn't mean that you've learned any more useful information. I mean, you may measure your growth in terms of like number of books I've read, 1% better every day. I'm going to just be reading more, right? Well, there's a slew of nutrition books that you can read where if you don't have the ability to discern critically that information, if it's accurate or not, you could be in a worse spot after all. And so this is where we have to be, is the change or newness that I'm creating actually a change that's moving me in a positive direction? I think you and I have discussed this concept offline a little bit, but I really like it a lot. It's this Goodhart's law.
Goodhart's, yep.
Where it's, from what I understand, the way that to understand it is when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So in this case, you may be thinking, okay, reading books is my way to get better in nutrition. And so the more books I read, that's your perception that you're getting better at. And so that's how you're measuring your progress. When if they're the carnivore book or the plant paradox book or some of those similar books that we've discussed, you may actually not be better off. So you're looking at like, look at all this progress I've made by reading these books, and yet your diet is no better for it. I want to take another nutrition example because I think this is another common one when people are trying to optimize nutrition is they'll start eliminating different foods. They'll cut out different diets, and what they often use is how they feel. So feeling good becomes the target, right? But what we know is that feelings don't always align to eating the right nutrients. I feel great after chocolate. Just turns out it doesn't have a lot of vitamin C or protein, right? And so feeling good becomes the target. And yet that's not really a great proxy for the overall system or outcome you want of kind of general health or whatever it is. So again, I think it's really easy to think like I'm going to make X change, and because this change is generally in the field or related to the outcome I want, it's going to be good. When we have to be really clear on, okay, now what's the real outcome we want so that these small changes are adding up to an overall big change in that outcome.
That's super interesting. It reminds me of a couple of episodes and conversations we've had. One of them being on the cold water exposure. So in some ways, it's like I sat in the ice bath for 77 minutes last week, and next week I'm going to try to do 79.
Right.
And it's so easy to forget that that's the point is not to sit in the ice water longer, right? The point is something else, right?
Right.
Recover, whatever
Totally.
one thinks that it is.
Decrease pain, increase performance.
Yeah. And I think we so often get hooked on like the thing.
Yes.
And I love your example of the sleep. Nobody's goal is to sleep more for the sake of sleep. Maybe somebody is. My goal is not to sleep more. It's to be a more useful human being the day after and the day after that. Right. And so it's so easy to forget that, again, we don't want to focus on it's not arbitrary, but the relatively arbitrary metric of hours slept or minutes in a cold bath or whatever.
All of these
it's the thing that we want to get that to.
Totally. All of these measurements are simplifying the overall system or what we want. Like performance comes down to so many things. How in the world could we just look at sleep hours and sleep hours only, right? And so it's just such a simplified kind of data point relative to what we want. But you're so right. The ice bath one is perfect. I'm going to increase my time next week. It's like, well, what is that doing besides increasing your time in the cold water?
And then the second thing you made me think of, and I think this will kind of lead into a question, is we just recently did a coaching call. And one of the things that really popped out to me is her name was Kayla. She was saying, okay, I'm going to do this, make these small changes. And then, in 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I'll see how I feel. Right. And then you're like, no, not how you feel. Remember what the point of this is. It's to move your performance in the direction you want to move it. Right. And so I bring that up, one, to just because it echoes your point, which you just said, which is like chocolate makes me feel good. Pizza makes me feel good. But is that actually what we're aiming for? And then two, if not that, and if not the arbitrary metric of more hours slept or more minutes in a cold bath, what outcomes should we be checking in with? If not those sort of easy to latch onto ones.
Yeah. I mean, I think weight's a good one. Fitness. How fast did I run 5K? How many pull-ups can I do in a row? What's my deadlift? Health markers, blood pressure, cholesterol. These are great starts. They're certainly not foolproof. There's still going to be approximations of the overall system that we care about. Like weight's the perfect example we've talked about before. Doesn't perfectly define health. It's part of your health picture. So just focusing on weight for your health and health only is not a complete picture either. But at least when we're looking at something like weight, or at least when we're looking at something like your 5K time or number of pull-ups, we have something that is measurable and objectively measurable, right? So those are the outcomes that I would really have people check in with, all while knowing that there's still probably simplifications of what you overall want. Weight, body comp, health markers. Maybe even you do want to do something like cognitive performance, fine enough, but you're going to have a way to objectively measure it. Like, is there a standardized test that you take every day at a certain time to see if your performance improves? Because otherwise just sort of like, oh yeah, I'm using TikTok less. Like, that can be generally good, but that doesn't mean that you're any more productive. Right. And so then what you have to do is, okay, so if you are going to make these diet changes, ideally you make one, or I don't know, a sleep change, or I'm reading more change, or whatever the change is. Ideally, you're making one and you're holding that constant, not trying to do 6 different changes at once, but holding it constant for at least 2 weeks. I'd go to 4 and then really check in. Did my weight change? Did my health change? Did my fitness change? Not just I feel better or I'm doing this task, but did these things that I think it's leading to actually move?
It reminds me, I was doing some reading recently and it was similar to this idea, but the crux of it was trying to find, or at least recognizing the value of a heuristic, right? Recognizing the value of a thing that, while imperfect, gives you a sense of whether or not you are tracking in the direction you are trying to track. And one of the examples, this one stuck in my head, is there's a blogger. His name is, well, not his name, but the name he uses is Mr. Money Mustache. He's kind of like a personal finance guy. And he kind of boiled down his heuristic to, are you moving, are you tracking in the right direction as it relates to your personal finance, was the savings rate, right? The delta between what you spend and what you make and what you spend, and et cetera. And so I say all that to say, is there a heuristic? You mentioned a handful of them. Is there a heuristic to you that is a valuable one? Again, it's not perfect. It's not like gives you all the answers, but as it relates to, let's just say, health in general, is there a heuristic that you would look at if you had to, if I made you pick the one thing to say, here's this person's fill in the blank, give me are they healthy? Are they tracking in the right direction, or are they not? Do you have one? I'm just curious because I don't think I've ever forced you to come down on like one thing.
This is actually, one of the things that I really like about CrossFit, the way they define health is based off of fitness. We're going to talk about some other topics, but like fitness and your ability to be fit across different areas from, pull-ups to deadlifts and stuff like that often speaks to your health capacity. And so, if you have to come down to one, I think it's pretty good. Good. You're not going to find somebody who is, absent of maybe some like, genetic outliers or something like that we won't be able to predict. But in terms of like chronic disease and preventable diseases, you're not going to find somebody who's increasing their deadlift and decreasing their run times, but is also getting worse off in terms of health.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Moving on. Third one you said was that this idea that we don't need continuous improvement, which I love. Yeah. I think you said that we often need, and this is like anathema to probably a lot of the people listening.
Right.
We need improvement,
right,
and then we need maintenance.
Yes,
and that's such an interesting idea, and it's so right, and it's so often not talked about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, with all the statistics that I say all the time about fruit and vegetable consumption and chronic disease and lack of exercise, okay, yes, we need improvement. But, there's this assumption that you can, need, or will get infinitely better. I mean, the graph, again, for continuous improvement just goes straight up. And it's like, no. There's a level when you have, in fact, reached enough. Again, maybe elite performance is the only thing I can think of that there might be this constant pushing for more, although they may never get it because maybe they're at their genetic limits. But that would be the only case where it's like, no, it's never enough. It's never enough. And it might not even be athletic performance. It could be something like musician or something like that, where it's like, what's the final limit I can get to? But for a lot of stuff in life, it's like, I don't need to get 1% better every day forever at sleep or forever at fruit and vegetable consumption.
One day we will all get to forever sleep.
That's true. But true.
I'm not sure we count that as optimizing it.
Right. Like there is a point at which I've had enough fruits and vegetables. I know I'm saying that, right? There is a point at which we've had enough weight loss or health improvements or pick your whatever it is. So like, I guess you could say, that's pretty obvious, but I don't know that it is in terms of application, because I see this a lot where we spend all this time, quote, optimizing, when really it's, in my opinion, a waste of time and money and resources, right? At some point, you've simply just reached maintenance. You're maintaining the good diet, you're maintaining the healthy weight, you're maintaining your fitness regime, and perhaps it's just a little tedious. In my opinion, though, once you get to this level where it's like, yes, I'm, quote, healthy enough for prevention's sake, great. Now I'm going to invest my time and attention into other things to do and try and learn in life, right? There's so many other hobbies and things to do besides, I don't know, look at some health tracker about your diet today. Mm-hmm. And I do want to tease out a little bit, though, the fitness goals here, because I know we have a fitness-focused audience. There is a point at which I believe we've reached maintenance in fitness as well. I'm hoping to actually do a podcast with a friend of ours soon on this, but I gave the example earlier of kind of like a 500-pound back squat, right? Let me tell you how many people need a 500-pound back squat in life. Zero. I mean, it's questionable how useful having more than, I don't know, a 225-pound back squat is, man or woman, right? So there is a point at which more fitness or strength is literally for more fitness or strength. And I get that. Like, hobbies are cool. Setting goals are great. A lot of us, thankfully, have a lot of time in life that we can try and accomplish some really cool feats. And so I don't want to squash this, like, people that want to get stronger for the sake of getting stronger. Pursuing difficult things is a great goal to have in life. But I also think that some of the underlying pursuit of this stuff becomes almost like, I need to do this 1% better every day because it will decrease my health risk, because it will make me better in the long term for quality of life. When in reality, it's like there is some level of fitness, health, nutrition that you can just achieve and then maintain, and then find other ways to explore and have fun in your life, that you don't need a 315-pound back squat to really live a full and happy life.
Selling people on maintenance. That's in case it wasn't hard enough to sell people on fruits and vegetables. Now you're going to try to sell them on maintenance. Okay. So So what is where do you see the problem with this idea of continuous improvement? I mean, you mentioned maybe we pursue more fitness than we need for the sake of just because I think maybe I need more fitness or I could be fitter.
Right.
Is there really any harm in that? Is there any harm with, okay, well, I'm at a healthy weight. I eat my 800 grams and my lazy macros, but I feel like I could do more than this. I feel like I could dial this in even more. I feel like there's the 1% changes I could make that might make big differences. What is what's the caution there? What would you caution people against?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. I don't want to dwell too much on the first one because I think we've kind of hammered it in some kind of like the Worried Well type podcast that we've had before. And it's just sort of these eliminations and these neuroses about foods that are not necessary. You know, I forget all the vegetables that the plant paradox guy says we shouldn't eat, but it's like, no, you can eat them. Like there's no need to exclude this. Yeah. Right. So there's going to be some unhealthy level of like food obsession that just is not necessary. Okay. But that also kind of leads to a second point that I think is more what I want to focus on here. And I actually did a social media post on a bit ago, but I came across this article that was looking at the 10 determinants of healthy aging. And yeah, I know we have aesthetic goals, and yeah, I know we have performance goals, but many people, especially I would say mid to late 30s and above, they start being like, you know what, I'm kind of in this for the long haul. I'm kind of interested in having this high quality of life thing. Yeah, I want to minimize.
Nobody ever asked me about my abs.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to minimize my disease risk. I want to be able to live independently. I want to do some fun stuff in life, all of that stuff. And so this study is looking at, what are these 10 determinants? And they were determined to be physical activity, diet, self-awareness, outlook and attitude, lifelong learning, faith, social support, financial security, community engagement, and independence. So those are the 10. And yeah, like diet's on the list, but there's a lot of other things on the list. Yep. And so it's like, yeah, let's do diet. I'm stoked about it. Let's do the basics. Let's get our vitamins, minerals. Let's get enough protein. Let's be at a healthy weight and then move on. And then move on to those other areas, attitude, self-awareness, community engagement, and on we go, right? And so that's sort of what the post in the caption said. It was just sort of like, where on this list was like, which whey protein powder is best and most clean? And what about CoQ10 supplementation? Like we have this time and obsession on this minutia of nutrition that really don't matter. And I would argue, if anything, are leading to a worsening of another outcome, potentially even by way of nutrition because you've gotten so neurotic about it, but also just poor outlook, poor attitude, fearful, right? And even maybe you could argue lack of engagement because you're afraid to go to these social events and take part of it. I've certainly seen that and been part of that myself, right? So there are so many other factors that lead into us having a high quality of life that our obsession on nutrition, while it's good for me and my business, is not really good for you and your overall life at a certain point. And so I guess kind of the obvious question is like, well, when do I call it quits, right?
Yeah.
When have you arrived? I would think, you're at a healthy weight, you're eating mostly whole foods, your doc says your health markers are good. Okay, you're done tinkering. Now you're just maintaining. Now you're just maintaining those practices, and you go on to find the exercise you like, find the community engagement, and all of this stuff. And so I guess kind of to wrap up this point, yes, I think small incremental changes of better are good, but we really have to make sure that these small incremental changes are actually leading to these outcomes that we want in terms of healthy weight, health markers. And then once we're there, we're done. There's no more work to be done. So it's not a continuous up. It's kind of a stair step to a level off.
That is a less shareable graphic on social media.
We're leveling off.
Stair step up, and then just, you're good.
Well, that's an interesting point though. A lot of us have room to step up, right? 80 and 90% of us not eating enough fruits and vegetables. We don't have to go through all those statistics. And you do have to use it or lose it. So there's still work to be done to maintain. Maintain isn't coast.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's a super interesting point. Maintain is not stop.
No.
Maintain is to maintain. It's to figure out what is the maximum sustainable pace I need to go to not go backwards, or to not go backwards in a substantial kind of way.
And arguably, I'd say it's more difficult because you're not doing all these interesting, fun new things. You're just maintaining. You're doing the basics day in and day out. You're spending that time, money, and investment learning about other aspects of your life that could be developed.
Yep. I think the biggest takeaway for me from this conversation is just the reminder that all of these things we talk about, health, nutrition, fitness, they're all proxies to other things in life. They're all bridges to the life we all say we want. Same thing with personal finance. Same thing with any number of things that we obsess over. We forget that they're not the point. Their value is in putting us in a place where we could do the things that matter. And we forget that. We stare at the trees. We forget we're looking at the forest.
Totally. And that's why I love that study on the 10 determinants. It's like diet's one line, and then they've got 9 other things. It's like, how are those going?
Yeah, love that. Okay. Thank you, EC. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. If you liked this episode or any episode that we put out, it is awfully helpful if you share it with a friend, if you share it on social media. That's how new folks find the show. EC and I appreciate it. Thank you for your ratings and your reviews. EC and I will be back next week for another episode of The Consistency Project.